Hello and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. I'm delighted to be joined once again by Darren Gardner, who's Country Manager for UK and Ireland at Keba. Hi Darren.
Hi Kate, good to be here again.
Good to speak to you again, indeed. I think we've got quite a lot of ground to cover, Darren. Things, in some respects, things are moving very quickly, and in others, I think we're maybe revisiting some lingering topics. So I'm gonna start straight away in with the Labour government mooting the idea of bringing back the 2030 ICE car deadline. That looks like it's definitely going to happen in one form or another, but still no mention of vans.
Yeah.
So at the time of recording this, do you think the date should be the same for vans or not? And what's your reasoning?
I want to say that it should, but I think when I talk to and listen to fleet operators, I think it depends is probably the answer. Certainly for larger fleets, I think it's harder for them to go through that transition by 2030. They've got bigger fleets, they've got more complex journeys, the commercials behind that are more complex, and I think it just takes time. I think it's easier for smaller fleets potentially, yeah. but also the access to finance for smaller fleets might be a barrier. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg one. I think if I was the Labour government, I think I would just go for it. I may put in some kind of dispensations for certain types of fleets. So I might stagger it a little bit. So those sort of low-hanging fruit fleets that could electrify by 2030 should do so. And those that are a little bit more complex, larger fleets or specialist types of fleets, for example, maybe they have a little bit longer to do that. But I think it's I think the government are probably looking at it in the round and probably don't distinguish that well between cars and vans. And they just see it as an electric vehicle. So it's a bit of a politician's answer, that one. I think you had to push me. If you had to push me, I would say let's just go for it, because whilst it is difficult for some fleets, I think the overall benefits to the economy and the overall benefits in terms of tailpipe emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and so on, probably outweigh the pain of delaying to 2035. So I think if I was the politician, I would just go for it.
Okay, good. I mean, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer on this, Darren. So I think you're on safe ground. Your opening statement was saying if they were listening to the fleets, you're listening to the fleets, and let's just hope that the government are also listening to the fleet operators out there, because this is really complex, and the idea that one rule fits all does make it sometimes quite unwieldy, I think. So definitely challenging. And I just can't help thinking, we're in October 2024, you know, so in the blink of an eye, it's going to be 2025, and you're only talking about 5 years away. That's incredibly stretching.
It is. And, you know, and even if you just renewed a lease for 4 years, that takes you to 2029. Yeah. So time is up. So I think that's part of the debate is for those people that are in those sort of leases that could take you past 2030 or right up to the deadline. It's a lot of pressure, and that's easy to cope with if you just operate in a small fleet of say 2 or 3 10 vans. If you're suddenly Royal Mail or BT or somebody with a huge fleet, then wow, that's a lot of pressure. Can it be done?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, of course, I'll give I'll give Royal Mail a nod straight away because they've electrified a lot of their vans. So they're certainly in a fairly comfortable position because they're leading the pack. And part of me thinks, Darren, I appreciate that this is your interview and your answer, but part of me thinks that actually the onus is fairly and squarely on the shoulders of the van manufacturers in terms of making vehicles that are fit for purpose and making them commercially viable in terms of that TCO, which it isn't entirely there yet for many use cases. So I think if the fleets who can will, if all the other factors line up. So
we partner with Ford. We're their global manufacturer of wall boxes, and I can say that just give them a bit of a shout out that they're doing great work in the van space, which everybody knows, and I think they're really working hard on that total cost of ownership.
Yeah,
as are other manufacturers, I'm sure, but yes, I think the onus is on those OEMs to understand the use case and drive down the costs for fleet operators.
Yeah, particularly with vans, it's so sensitive to those financials. It really is. Well, let's stick with vans, but let's switch our focus, Darren, to the second-hand van market, which is particularly important for sole traders and SMEs. And according to the zero emission van plan, for every new van sale, there are 2.5 used vans sold. Not electric, that's the entire market. Now, we know that the second-hand electric van market is fairly nascent at the moment, but what can we do to stimulate that market and make sure it succeeds?
Well, I think it will follow the car market. It's logical, really. You can't have a second-hand market until you've got that supply of second-hand vehicles, and it's a tough one because we've sold 11,000 vans, electric vans, battery electric vans year to date so far. So there isn't an awful lot of supply in the second-hand market, and also it's a chicken and egg thing here because you don't want to depreciate the vehicles too much that fleets have just bought, so that there is an influx of second-hand vehicles, and yet at the same time, if there isn't a good level of depreciation in those vehicles, then the second-hand market prices will still be quite high. So it's a tricky one to get right. So I think the first thing is probably just needs time. In terms of allowing those second-hand vehicles to come into the market. That's probably going to be 2035, maybe, and then obviously then depreciation levels will be better understood. So I think that's something, and then maybe there are some grants or something that the government can do to incentivize people to buy second-hand vans. Maybe there's a scrappage scheme or something like that. So, but I think it's just time.
Oh, well, certainly if the vehicles aren't there, you can't sell them. I agree with you. The idea of subsidies to second-hand electric vans is very interesting. We've seen that in other countries in Europe, and it's been very popular. And I think particularly if we are talking about SMEs and sole traders, it's a great way to incentivize them to move into this market. You said yourself, sometimes the smaller fleets can make that switch easier than the bigger van fleets. So it could become a shining success in some ways, I think. Got to get it right though.
It could, but what you don't, and I don't understand this, is what would the impact of a grant or a subsidy be on the depreciation of the vehicle? Because if to encourage the second-hand market, the prices, the depreciation levels are so high that then suddenly all these fleets, that they've bought brand new vans, and then those fleet values are then depreciating massively. That's not a great deal either. So it's a I don't know what the impact of grants and subsidies might be on that. I think that's something to bear in mind.
Yeah, and we are seeing this kind of residual value roller coaster on the passenger vehicle side at the moment. So, but I think in the early days, when there are so few second-hand electric vans, the RVs will hopefully be reasonably buoyant. It's when you kind of get that first bulge of volume vehicles coming through that you risk the RVs dropping. Yeah, interesting. Now, if we think vans are difficult, what about the heavier goods vehicles? So very, it's still very much an emerging market, but, what do you see that journey to zero emission HGVs looking like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert actually in HGV, but I guess I see a use case for heavy goods vehicles in terms of lorries probably is hydrogen, but I also see a lot of electric lorries out there, and I guess it just depends on the trip profile as to what the best power source is. All I can say is that from my energy days is that production of hydrogen is expensive, and so whilst I guess the technology is there in terms of hydrogen fuel cells. I'm a few years out of date, of course, but being able to produce hydrogen is expensive, and so even if the technology is right, do the commercials work? So I guess that's probably one thing. I do see lots of use cases for even 22 kilowatt AC on buses.
Yeah.
So for example, with Two-Bus and our partner VEV, we're powering the London tour buses on the 22 kilowatt AC Keba charger. So I think the infrastructure is more developed and more understood, even in the AC space. Certainly, DC charging is a thing. But of course, there's I think it's the biobus, I think it's called, in Bristol, which is literally run on human poo.
I knew you were going to say that.
And I think I heard the MD of that company said, if I'm allowed to swear, Kate, you can edit this out, but he says his opening gambit was, our buses are and of course that gets everybody's attention, but it shows that even on heavy goods vehicle like a bus, you can power them on pretty much
there are alternative fuels. I think is the word that we're looking for.
So I think it almost, for me as a non-expert in HGV, as people from Volvo Trucks, I guess, but I can see that you can power HGV from a number of fuel sources.
Yeah.
But for me, is like, what's the most sustainable and environmentally and financially? And I think the market seems to be voting with its feet in terms of electric.
Yeah. Because it is zero emission, whereas unfortunately your bus isn't zero emission. It's potential as a transition fuel, but long term maybe not. And you're absolutely right about looking at the bus market, particularly the city bus market, rather than the coach market, to say, it's a real success story, not just in the UK, but across the whole of Europe, globally, China, South America. It's super interesting. I'm a bit of a bus fan.
But I suspect in like sort of massive countries like Australia or the United States, where you've got lorries doing huge trips, then the case for hydrogen is that much stronger. Maybe, but
don't tell Elon Musk, will you? Because he still thinks it's electric.
I'm not telling him anything.
But Yeah, we will see, and absolutely noted your comment about hydrogen and the cost of hydrogen. It's implicitly linked to the cost of electricity, but will always be more expensive because it's so energy intensive. So that's one of the few things I can say for certainty about hydrogen, is that if you're waiting for it to become dirt cheap, it's not.
Going to happen.
No. And okay, so for our commercial vehicle operators then, I think we're agreed that there may not be the right vehicle there at the moment for you in terms of zero emission. In the short term, any other advice on implementing decarbonisation measures for those commercial vehicle operators?
If you can't do anything, then buy the most energy efficient vehicle that you possibly can, standard. And then I think there are things that you can do in the wider ecosystem that can help decarbonise your business. So you could run a salary sacrifice scheme for your employees to go electric. You could make sure that you've got renewable energy and energy efficient buildings. And you could start with measuring your scope 1, 2, and 3 carbon emissions. And it may be a dirty word for some, but at least it's something. You could do some carbon offsetting. So measuring your emissions and doing something about it might be a good place to start. Helping your colleagues and your customers take advantage of an electric vehicle, and making sure that your business is energy efficient and powered by renewable energy is probably what I would do. And I'd encourage things like cycling schemes and lift car shares and all the rest of it, if you can't do anything.
Yeah. But Darren, wise words. At a recent GreenFleet roundtable, we had the pleasure of the company of a guy who worked for a haulage business who is waiting for the electric trucks, and in the meantime has a 4 megawatt grid connection and is producing a lot of solar PV. So he's ready, literally, and waiting. And what a great position to be in, because in the meantime he's exporting a lot of electricity to the grid. So. Yeah,
exactly. Do that.
Yeah,
what
brilliant.
Would you do? What would you do, Kate? You know.
Same. I'm really keen on biofuels. Although they're not zero emission, they are a great way of removing carbon from your fleet in the short term. So and it's a drop in fuel, so you don't have to change your vehicles. And your point about obviously Euro 6, Euro 7 vehicles, it makes an enormous difference. So there's plenty to be going at for those people who are waiting. So.
Good.
Great. Well, thank you, Darren. It's been a pleasure talking to you as always. And thank you to Keba for joining GreenFleet Talks.
Thanks, Kate.
Cheers. Thanks. That is about all we've got time for. Thank you for watching. Tune in to GF365 again soon.